everybody. Welcome. And I'm going to let people sort of take their time to get logged on. And if you are able to and willing to turn on your webcams, that would be great as well. It's always nice to see who we're actually talking to. Great. Yes. All right. So I'll remind everybody before we begin officially to turn on their webcams one more time. All right. Hello. Welcome. Good morning for those of you guys joining us from the US, and good evening for those of you guys joining us from China. My name is Devin Lau, and I'm the Assistant Director for Yale Center Beijing, and we're very happy to have Professor Zoe Chance join us today for a wonderful talk on her new book, which I will get to introducing real soon. I know that some of you guys must be new to Yale Center Beijing and our activities, so a quick introduction. We are established in 2014. We are Yale's only university-wide center, and we host all sorts of professors, students, and alum, as well as thought leaders from around the world on various topics, everything from biology to art history to astronomy, economics, you name it. We've done a program on it. And so today we're very happy to have Professor Zoe Chance join us for a topic that transcends all topics, which is on influence. So quick introduction, Professor Zoe Chance is Assistant Professor of Marketing at Yale SOM, as well as a very popular writer, teacher, speaker, researcher, as well as a climate philanthropist. She's earned her doctorate from Harvard and now teaches the most popular course at Yale School of Management, which is her Mastering Influence and Persuasion course. Her research has been published in top academic journals as well as covered in popular global media outlets. Her fascination with today's topic of interpersonal influence led her to publish a science-based but also very fun and I would say life-changing book, which is the inspiration for today's conversation. This book, Influence Is Your Superpower, The Science of Winning Hearts, Sparking Change, and Making Good Things Happen, is being published in more than 20 languages around the world. And I just want to say that of special note, she is one of the rare professors whose research has traveled out of the ivory tower and into everyday life, as she's clearly doing with this book. For example, her framework for behavior change is the foundation for Google's global food policy, which affects tens of thousands of people around the world. And I'm sure it has a lot to do with her own experience before joining academia, which includes managing a $200 million segment of the Barbie brand, as well as helping out with political campaigns and working in jobs such as door-to-door sales and telemarketing. So a host of experiences that I'm sure we'll be able to get to. And so we're very excited to have her. So today, our typical event is usually a talk of about 20 to 30 minutes plus a Q&A, but we discussed and we thought that it would be more beneficial today to have just an open conversation. And so I'll start the time with a few questions for Professor Zoe Chance, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the audience to ask questions. The way that we can do this is on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see that there is a chat button. Feel free to start entering your questions onto the chat, and I will do my best to sort through them and try to get to the ones that I think will be most relevant. Alternatively, you can also raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand function, and we'd be happy to call on you. We do ask again that if you are able to and willing to, please turn on your webcams. It's always better to talk to at least a face instead of just a black screen or many boxes of black screens. And so that would be very helpful for those of you guys that are willing to and able to please turn on your webcams. All right, so with that, let's get started. Thank you again for joining us, Professor. And before we jump into the specifics of the book, I just wanted to hear a little bit more about all of your own fascinating experiences, which I touched on. But I know that, there have been various things that have kind of led you to this point in publishing this book. You, of course, teach Yale SOM's most popular course, Mastering Influence and Persuasion. So could you tell us a little bit more about yourself as well as your class and how you started to become interested in this topic?
Sure. And Devin, thank you so much for the kind introduction. And I'm really happy to be here with everyone. I wish that we could be in person. I've come to teach multiple times in China and including at Yale Center in Beijing. And I look forward to when I get to come back or when you get to come to Yale to hang out with us. When I was growing up, I felt very uninfluential, and I was very uninfluential. I was very, very shy. And I was such a nerd that I had a theory that the reason people talked over me when I spoke was that my voice was the exact same frequency as the ambient sounds of the universe. So this is what a nerd I was. So you can imagine why I didn't have a whole lot of friends. And I wanted to be able to relate to people, and I wanted to have them hear me. When I spoke, I started doing theater and drama. And my first play I auditioned for was guaranteeing everyone a speaking role. It was the play of Aladdin. And my role was shoemaker number 3. And I got to say shoes for sale. Was not auspicious. But I started learning how to relate to people through theater, acting, directing, and then through marketing and sales. And when I came to first of all, back to academia, I studied at MIT and then Harvard to get my doctorate to understand decision-making. And when I began teaching influence, I was teaching standard influence strategies and techniques that people were writing about, researching about, that I learned in marketing and sales. But my students and the executives who came to my workshops were telling me that might be okay for influencing a customer, but that's not anything that I can use to influence my boss or my employee, my colleague, my partner, my child. And so what I've been working on developing over the past 10 years of teaching the class and 5 years of writing this book is influence strategies for having long-term relationships that feel comfortable on both sides. And one thing that's been really fun about writing this book, it got published on February 1st, so just 1 month ago. And it will be published in Chinese. I don't know exactly what time, but there will be lots going on when that happens. So far, it's been in the US and the UK, and the UK distributes internationally in English. In both the US and the UK, this book reached second fastest selling of all books on Amazon. So it's been very exciting. And multiple people have reached out to me to say that they are getting this book for their manager, lots for their employees, but also for their manager and their partner. And people are giving this book to people who are trying to influence them. And to me, that's the biggest mark of success for my work and certainly for this book. What I've been trying to do is empower people to have a voice who don't have as much influence as they could or as they should.
Wonderful. That's a very good introduction. So then how did you sort of, I mean, because you've been teaching this class for a while now on influence and persuasion. So how did you decide that, you know what, I need to put this information down into a book form and get this out to more than just the people at Yale SOM?
As soon as I started teaching the class, actually, before I started, the class was already popular. So yes, I'm a great teacher, but I didn't have to be for people to be excited. Day 1 was standing room only. Nobody knew who I was, but we didn't even have enough chairs in the room to seat all of the people from across the whole university who wanted to come and learn about influence, because influence is power. And we don't get trained in this very most basic skill of how to relate to other people, work collaboratively together. We don't get trained in how to get what we want. And as a result, so many of us are frustrated, and especially the people who come to Yale. It's not that there aren't smart, nice people all over the entire world, in every city and town and school, but the ethos of Yale, in particular, especially out of all the business schools, at least out of all the top business schools, the ethos of Yale is very consistent with what I call the Spider-Man doctrine, and some other comic book fans do, but it's been made famous by Winston Churchill. It's in the Christian and I guess Jewish Bible, this idea that with great power comes great responsibility. And influence is the path of power. So I believe that when we choose the path of influence, we have a great responsibility to other people. And I've been trying to teach that. So since this is my belief, it's my responsibility to share the power outside of these ivory halls of this very elite institution that so few people get to come and be a part of. And some of it is hard work, some of it is talent, and a lot of it is luck, and some of it is money, right? So I don't want to restrict power to those of us who are lucky enough and have enough money and connections and all of the other things to get to have it.
Absolutely. That's great. I think that, you use sort of the Spider-Man doctrine, as you call it, which I think is a great sort of example of just how your book overall is sort of structured, is you try to use very fun and approachable ways to sort of make your points. And I think anybody who sort of will pick up your book will notice right away that it's just a really fun and inviting book. And
Thank
you put a
you.
lot of creative spins on what you're trying to do. Even from like the book title itself to the stories you tell, and even the names of the chapters. So I'm just going to share some of the names of the chapters, which I think are just pretty hilarious. There's one called The Inner 2-Year-Old, and there's Defense Against the Dark Arts, The No That Saved the World. So just to give people a taste of sort of what they're going to be looking at. And I also love how you've organized the book. It's sort of a choose your own adventure kind of thing that you're doing. So I'm assuming that all this sort of fun way to write all this material was intentional. And of course, there are specific reasons you chose to come up with this creative format as well as these fun chapter titles. So I'm just curious, what are these strategies of influence that you're using on us? I mean, are they like based on, specific academic or scientific studies that you've seen in your studies?
I absolutely, first and foremost, wanted to please myself when I was writing this book, because I've been working so hard on it for the past 5 years. So if it wasn't fun for me, then I wasn't even going to finish the book. So I was my number one target reader and writer. But obviously that's not enough. And that's not, me pleasing myself is not going to serve the purpose of getting the ideas out there. And when we're trying to influence other people, one of our biggest hurdles is that everyone has, as Devin mentioned, what I call this inner 2-year-old who's resistant to being told what to do. And this is even when we pick up a book that, we wanted to read to learn something, even when we've gone to ask somebody for advice. We have this resistance to being told what to do. And we have this natural skepticism. And also we are designed, and I read about this in the book, we're designed to follow the path of least resistance. Ease has a bigger impact on behavior than anything else, literally anything else. And it's not actually logistical ease, but the feeling of ease that makes all the difference. So it was so important to me that in writing this book, which has a ton of science in it, and lots of advice, that it didn't feel like I'm trying to tell you what you have to do, even though I'm giving you lots of ideas. And it needed to feel easy to read. And so that included being fun, having stories in it. And the half chapters, I wrote because it was fun for me to write and easier to work on something small and tractable than something big. But the research idea behind that is that when we're evaluating a series of episodes, like say every time you go to class, right? Or every meeting that you have with a particular team of people, we average them. And when we are averaging the experience of, say, reading some long half chapters and some short half chapters, overall, it feels easier to read because we have these half chapters interspersed in between. And there's also, just specifically for books, I read somewhere, and I don't remember what the study was, but books with shorter chapters get read more because a lot of people read a chapter before going to sleep, and they'll look ahead and see, can I get through this next chapter before going to sleep? If no, they close the book. And if yes, they go ahead and go through. So these are some of the things behind this idea.
Absolutely, guilty as charged. So, I mean, we talked about how much of the book is based on a lot of scientific studies from psychology and neuroscience and cognitive science. So, without giving away too much of the book, because there's a lot of fun stuff in there. Could you maybe go a little bit more into one or two of the key scientific findings that I think a lot of us might be surprised by, and sort of talk about how that forms the basis of some of the strategies that you suggest people use?
The fundamental idea in behavioral economics, which is the fundamental psychology of the book, is related to what we just talked about this experience of ease and having fun while reading the book, which is so relevant to you as an influencer, not necessarily a social media influencer, although maybe you are, but someone who wants to be influential. And I'm going to assume most people are not currently writing a book. If you are, good luck to you. This idea is that we have two systems in our mind that are working together or against one another to determine all of our decisions and all of our behavior. If you've read or studied at all about behavioral economics, the official name that I don't use is System 1 and System 2. And I don't use that official name because when I've been teaching behavioral economics, I find that even the smartest people mix up which one is System 1 and which one is System 2. I use the analogy of a gator and a judge. System 1 is the gator, and like an alligator, it is fast, it is unconscious, and this is like a gator lurking below the surface of the water. The system is lurking below the surface of your conscious awareness, constantly scanning the environment for opportunities and threats. When it acts, it's so fast, it's almost instantaneous, even though you can't mostly perceive this. But also like an alligator, it is very, very efficient. And what that looks like is being incredibly lazy. A real life alligator is so efficient that they only want to eat about 1 kilogram of meat per week. And they can go up to 3 years without eating anything at all, although they weigh 500 kilos. So these are animals that at least I think of as being vicious, or I have thought of as being vicious, but what they really are is lazy. And that's like us with almost all influence attempts that come across our radar. We're scanning the environment. First of all, if you're trying to influence me, then you are trying to take my attention, maybe my time, maybe my money, maybe my social capital. Whatever you're trying to take from me, you are a threat. And so my inner 2-year-old is instantly like, you're not the boss of me. And I'm trying to resist. And the main way that I resist is I ignore. The second way that I resist is obviously just to say no. But, and then no. This whole unconscious system is also the same part of us that is determining our habitual behavior, and everything that we've done over time through practice becomes habitual so that we don't have to think about it that much. And that's the other reason that ease is the biggest determining factor in what we do, that this gator system can take care of everything that's easy. And this system takes almost no energy or conscious attention at all. The other system, officially System 2, but I call it the judge, like a human judge, is conscious, slow, deliberative, trying to be rational. And this takes a lot of effort. They can consider only one case or only one topic at a time. And this is our conscious attention. We actually can't multitask with our conscious attention. We can only focus on one thing at a time. And anytime we're trying to multitask on things that take our conscious attention, what we're really doing is task switching. Although you can multitask when the other thing that you're doing is something taken care of by the gator, including something like driving. If you're used to driving, it's incredibly complex and dangerous. However, through practice, it's become habitual, so you don't have to consciously think about it, and you can talk to somebody sitting in the car with you, right? Hopefully not texting. But the judge part, like a real human judge, is not actually objective, just trying to be objective. The judge is very heavily influenced by the gator. Researchers who study unconscious processes imagine, or they estimate, that the gator is responsible for up to 95% of all of our decisions and behavior. And this is the opposite of how we, especially if we're smart, try to, and I know that you are because you're here and you were interested in coming here, and only nerds do that. The gator influences the judge, but we are trying to reach that judge part of other people when we influence them through facts, data, information. All of that stuff is important, but only if we're interested. Information is not important unless we're already interested in hearing it. So the gator stuff, because it's fast, our unconscious, immediate, intuitive, emotional reactions always happen first. The judge processing of data and information only happens second. And all of that had to go through the gatekeeper of the judge. And I know that's a mouthful of the gator and the judge, but this is the fundamental shift that we can make when trying to influence people. Is we want to figure out how to have them have a positive gut reaction to us. And then they will do the rationalizing so that they'll be looking for information and evidence that suits those desires and hypotheses. So their judge will always be biased, and we want their judge to be biased toward us instead of against us.
So let's maybe come up with some concrete examples to sort of illustrate some of this. Because it does seem like one of the main themes of the book is basically that nobody actually operates the way we think we operate, and so can you sort of come up with maybe one or two examples that we could sort of dive into?
Sure, and let's just go as simple as possible. Like, we're all here on Zoom, and there are lots of things that you can do on your next Zoom meeting to have other people feel engaged, included, interested more than they normally do. And when we're on Zoom, the gator temptation is always going to be multitasking. So every time we're in a group Zoom meeting, everyone in the Zoom meeting is tempted to be doing other stuff. And I know plenty of you are doing other stuff, and that's okay. That's totally natural. But what I suggest is that you encourage people, and I'll encourage you right now, to engage anytime, all the time with the chat. And it doesn't have to be smart things. It doesn't have to be questions for whoever is talking. But let's just start with, in the chat right now, would you just type in one adjective to describe how you're doing today? Just type in one adjective. Great. Thank you. And a lot of us are doing well in different ways, complex. And some of us are nervous, right? Complex. You don't have to be doing great. But when I ask you, type into the chat, how are you doing? Then your attention immediately comes into the present moment and you get engaged. So this is now your gator brain attention is here more closely than it was already. Something that Devin is doing that I ask my TAs. So if you were TAing for my online class, the students wouldn't know, but I would have told you it's part of your job to smile. That's part of your job to smile online. And just having one smiling person in a Zoom meeting makes such a difference to the whole feel of the room when we see each other. And Luke, I feel you. I feel you being exhausted. Thank you for being here anyway. Another thing that helps. And I just saw a bunch of people smile who have your cameras on. Thank you. Thank you. It's really helpful. And when you are in a Zoom meeting talking to people, we feel your presence more when we feel that you're making eye contact with us. And the way that you do that is by, instead of making eye contact with the person and say, I'm looking over there and talking to where I see them, I can look at the person when I'm listening. And that's what we usually do. But often when we're speaking, we kind of look off into the ether as we're thinking of what to say, and you can practice speaking to the camera. So make eye contact with the camera when you're speaking, and it's fine to be looking off camera when you're listening. And these are just some so simple things that has other people feel interested and present. You can also use their name more. So, and when you're leading a meeting, I suggest that when it's online, you do cold calling much more than in real life. Because if you just ask a question of the room that's an open-ended question, it's easy to have silence for a long time, right? I believe cold calling questions. So cold calling is when you just ask somebody, and I would just call on one of you, give you a question and expect you to respond immediately. When people know that they might be cold called, that means that they're less likely to multitask and more likely to pay attention. So when we're in the situation that all of us are paying attention, we're listening better, and then we're able to take in more information. In an offline world, very simple thing is just asking people when is a good time to talk to them about whatever the topic is that you want to talk about. And then you say, okay, so we were going to talk about this topic. Is this still a good time? If they tell you yes, then they're already paying attention. And these are the simple hurdles to have them be receptive to this information. So, and I guess I'll just, while I'm on a roll, giving very concrete advice, like baby steps. The little stuff is the big stuff. Another thing that almost nobody does as well as they could and should is prepare for a meeting when you're encountering somebody new. And before you do that, find as much information as you can about them online so that you are predisposed to like them when you meet them. Find things, maybe there are things you have in common, maybe there are things that you're curious about, maybe there are things that you're impressed or intrigued by. When you show up predisposed to like them, you have already in your own mind a more personal connection, and then you can ask those questions so that they feel it too. And by your liking them, that gives them the biggest chance of liking you, which puts them into that space of wanting to say yes to whatever it is that you're offering or asking, and wanting to rationalize reasons for doing so.
We're already getting into a lot of very good practical tips here, which is great. And I'm sure that there's many more that we'll cover. One of the things I mentioned when I introduced you was you were very influential actually in setting Google's food policy. And I think that may be another way that we can sort of discuss some of these influential nudges. I think that's what people often call them, right? I know that I've been lucky enough to sort of eat at many of the various Google campuses around the world. And they do really put a lot of thought and time and energy and money into these little nudges that influence how they think about what to eat, and not just for their personal health, but also for environmental and planetary health reasons. And they take really great pride in it, right? Like I know that they hire a lot of top chefs from 11 Madison Park and other famous restaurants. So I'd be very curious to hear sort of, I know some of the strategies that they've used because they've discussed them, but could you share about your experience working on Google's food policy, especially for people who may not be as familiar with it, and sort of give some examples of some of the simple ideas that you sort of proposed that they utilize to nudge people in the right direction?
Yeah, the philosophy of behavioral economics is sometimes called Libertarian Paternalism. I'm not a libertarian, and I have mixed feelings about paternalism. What Google the words Google uses to describe their food policy is along the lines of maternalism. And I've never heard anyone else use this to describe a policy, but the idea is, like your mom, the people who run the food team are trying to take good care of you. So they're trying to help you be healthy, but they also really want you to be happy, and they really want you to feel good. And so as they're trying to help you be healthy, and as you said, Devin, trying to take care of the world, they're not going to prohibit you from, say, eating something that's not healthy, but they just want to very, very gently encourage you to make good choices, partly because Google employees call themselves Googlers, and new Google employees call themselves Nooglers. Nooglers complain about what they call the Noogler 15, which is and this is in pounds, not kilos, but it's the weight that they say that they gain their first year at Google, because one of the Google policies has been to have free food available within 30 meters at all times. And so wherever you are, you have food somewhere nearby. So what we did this is with the Yale Center for Customer Insights here at the business school, that's run by my colleague Ravi Dar. And I connected the Google food team with this center so that lots of us could work on this project, and not just me. We did many studies. This relationship has been ongoing since, I don't know. It's probably like 2014 or something, a longstanding relationship now, where students work with them, faculty work with them, and we do research, we write papers. They come here, we go there. They've hired a bunch of our students. We help them help their employees without making them angry, so without getting the of the inner 2-year-old. And we've had studies that are as simple as sending experimenters like spies into their break rooms, where they'll have 2 different beverage areas where you could get coffee or whatever. And there's a snack bar that's closer to one of those areas and farther to the other one. But the 2 drinking stations are in the same room. And we'll just have a research assistant they pretend that they're texting on their phone, and they're just marking off for each person who goes to one of those drink stations, did they get a snack? And we found in this study with over 1,000 observations and then we just stopped because it was so clear that people who were getting a drink from the drink station closer to the snacks were 50% more likely to get a snack. And then we see how often people come to the drink stations, and we can calculate the effect was a little bigger for men than for women. But if you were a man, then just this one simple thing was likely to lead to you gaining 2 kilos per year just because of where you got your drink. And so this tiny, tiny finding not only influenced those of us who are working on it, like I just started hiding the junk food from myself in my cupboard. Like my family likes cookies, and we just put the cookies in an opaque container in the same cabinet where they were. One of the other students on the project was drinking a little too much beer, and he just started leaving beer in the basement so that he would have to go down to the basement every time he wanted to get a beer. And I found the cookies molded. He found he wasn't drinking very much anymore. But and not just Google, but the architectural firm who designs the break rooms for Google and many other employers decided to change their policies and architectural design to just separate drinks and snacks. So this is coming back again to the power of ease. Almost all nudges, when you hear of behavioral economics nudges, almost all of them operate on this principle that if you make it easier for somebody to do something, or you make it harder for them to do something, that's the most influential thing that you can do to change their behavior. And one of the important principles behind this is that if what you're trying to influence is somebody's behavior, you might not need to change their mind at all. A lot of energy is wasted trying to change minds when what we really wanted to do is change behaviors. It's often harder, in fact, to change people's minds. than to change people's behaviors. And just because you've changed their mind doesn't at all mean you're going to change their behavior. And you know, like if I just asked you to write down what is the number one behavior you would like to change, guaranteed you've already been trying to do it. You already have the motivation, but it's just not easy. And so the best thing you could do for yourself is figure out how to make it a little bit easier, let go of the idea of motivation, because ease is going to have a bigger impact.
So that sort of brings us back to this idea of there are a lot of mistaken assumptions, I think, that we have about ourselves and about other people and how we can influence other people. What are there any other obvious kind of mistaken assumptions that we probably have that you think would be sort of low-hanging fruit for us to change?
Yeah, the simplest mistaken assumption, and I'm going to give everybody a challenge right now if you're up for it for the next 24 hours. The simplest misunderstanding we can shift is this idea that people are not going to like us if we say no to them, because we're imagining that saying no to somebody is a personal rejection and they're going to experience it that way. And rejection is processed in the brain actually the same way as physical pain. So that part is real, and we're kind, and we don't want to cause pain to other people. But what happens is we're reluctant to say no. And this is just about all of us are people pleasers. I've had the interesting privilege to read now 1,000 private journals that students are keeping about influence as they practice and reflect on the influence challenges and experiences that they have, and to talk with thousands of executives around the world to find that even the most extroverted, privileged, senior people are uncomfortable with influence and uncomfortable specifically saying no in some contexts of their lives. So if you're up for it, practice saying no for the next 24 hours. Practice saying no to every single person who asks you for something. And it could be professional or personal, big or small, something you want to do, something you don't want to do. And the reason that I'm asking you to do this, there are multiple reasons, but first of all is that what I've found is that most of us don't realize how uncomfortable we are saying no until we start practicing it, and we feel like, it's scary. And when we start practicing it, if we practice saying no warmly, then we get to separate saying no to the request, but yes to the person. So we're interacting warmly with the other person. And it doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, I would really love to. I'm so sorry, but I can't. That's fine. It could also be on the other end of the spectrum, like, oh my God, absolutely no, I would really hate that. It would be terrible. It would be terrible. And I understand that there are cultural differences in how, like major cultural differences in how direct we are expected to be in saying no. So you know so much better than I do in China, in your organization, in your family, what's the range of acceptable ways to say no. But what I'm asking you is to say no more directly than you're used to. So it might not be as directly as I do, like, oh my God, no, that would be my worst nightmare. If that's not going to work for you, like maybe with your boss, like never. But with your boss, you could say no by saying, I can absolutely do that for you, and I need to reprioritize. So let's take a look at what else is on my plate. So what you're doing is saying no to something so that you can work on that thing instead of just accepting the pile on of stuff that gets requested. As you say no, don't ruin your life. Obviously, if you get your dream job or your sweetie proposes to you, don't be like, no. Take care of your life. You're the boss of you. And you always have the right to change your mind. So experience what it's like to say no, experience their reaction, which is typically less bad than you expect by a long shot. And then in that moment or tomorrow or next week or in a year, if you want to change your mind and say yes, they'll be perfectly happy. The other huge reason that I invite you to do this, and the reason that I teach it as the first challenge I think it's probably the first challenge of my book, it's the first challenge of my class, is that as we get more comfortable saying no, we get more comfortable with the idea of other people saying no to us. And then when we're asking for things, we ask with less pressure, which ironically, by making them more comfortable saying no, has them more inclined to say yes, because there's nothing for them to resist from us. When we pressure them, we have this needy kind of edge that's repulsive. But when we're relaxed and we're warm, making an open invitation, they want to be part of that. Like Devin's attitude that he shows you so clearly in this conversation and through his nonverbal body language is so open and welcoming that you kind of want to say yes to him, regardless of what idea he's offering, right? And the idea might or might not be the right one for you, but he's demonstrating perfectly. So this makes my job really easy. This is exactly what I'm talking about having somebody's gator reaction be, I'd like to figure out how to be part of that. So thank you for Devin. Thank you for that, Devin.
Oh, thanks. I feel like I should be asking for everybody to like donate money to me or something now.
Go for it. If there's a request you want to make, go for it.
Instead, I will focus our attention to one of the questions in the chat, which you actually already touched on, but I think maybe there's room for expansion here. Jing Wang asked how to influence people when they told you they have no interest in what you want to say. So you already sort of touched on that. I'm so glad
you're asking. I don't think I have. Okay. I would only ask if I can check back with them later. I would not try in that moment at all to influence them, because they're not going to be open-minded. If they've told me they have no interest, I take that seriously. I take that at face value. And the only thing that I can do is make them angry if I'm trying to influence them in that situation. However, if I ask, okay, I understand I don't want to bother you. Would you mind if I check back later? If they say yes, I'm not going to check back later, right? That's it. That's done. But if they say, yes, you can check back with me, I'll choose a time frame. And then when I come back to them and I say, I reached out to you a month ago and you said that it wasn't a good time. Is this still a good time to talk about this issue? There's a principle that's called commitment and consistency that has us feel strong internal pressure to do the things we said we were going to do. And so when I remind them, you said that I could check back with you in a month, they feel internal pressure to be consistent with that promise that they made and to allow me to follow up with them. And then I have their attention. And what they didn't realize probably when they were making this agreement with me is that they were committing to be as open-minded as they could. It doesn't mean they're going to say yes, but it means they're giving me as much of their open-minded attention as they possibly can. And what I am exchanging for that is my sincere commitment to not bothering them if they've told me, affirmed, they really don't want to be bothered. So we're being sincere on both sides.
Great. I think that's really helpful. Part of it is just being, I think, okay with being, people saying no to us as well, right? And that's sort of what the practice is for. There's another question on the chat. How do we influence people who have doubt on our character or the character of anyone who's in our industry? For example, how do we ask someone who's convinced NFTs are Ponzi schemes to check it out? So I guess the question of sort of open-mindedness, I think we can expand this to a lot of other things that we're seeing as well, right? So how do we help people become more open-minded and I guess susceptible to influence in a positive way?
So two separate things on this. The first one is, if you're trying to change people's behavior in a meaningful way, absolutely focus on people who are already open-minded and already interested. Focus on making it easier for them to take action and getting a coalition, like aim for a coalition of the willing. That's what you want to activate. It's so much harder to open somebody's mind who's closed. What I'll say though is there will be some, so I don't know if the NFT situation is for any reason something that you really need to open somebody's mind about, but it's totally fun. So I love that you asked it. When you are hoping to open somebody's mind a little bit and they're closed-minded to this thing, first of all, focus on baby steps. Baby steps, because opening somebody's mind is very rare and it takes a very long time, and it happens in a relationship, not a conversation. Conversion never happens in a conversation, a single conversation. But in the relationship, with baby steps that are, because they're baby steps, they're not sparking so much resistance. And one of the best strategies that you can use along with warmth is humor. Humor is very, very hard to resist. And when you're reaching out to someone with warmth and with humor, they will at the very least pay attention to what it is that you have to offer. And when, like, let's say you're wanting to share with them the awesomeness of NFTs, you would, for example, be sharing with them some super funny, awesome ones, and maybe some great news about how you made a whole giant pile of money trading these things, right? And you're not saying, hey, you need to do this. You're just saying, hey, look at this funny thing. And hey, oh my God, look how great this is for me. So when they don't feel that you're trying to influence them, and it's just baby steps, they'll be a little bit more receptive.
Great. Looks like Connie has a question. Thank you for raising your hand. It's good to have other people talking.
Hi, Connie.
Hi. Thank you so much, Professor. It was so lovely to hear from you. Yeah, so I really, can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I really resonated with you when you said that, you know, when you were young, you were also quite introverted and you sometimes felt like you know, your voice wasn't really heard. I think right now I'm at this transitioning stage where I try to break out of my, you know, comfort zone. And sometimes I would find it very comfortable to speak in front of others. Sometimes, especially in front of people who seem a bit more dominant or a bit more, like a bit stronger. Their you know, ambience is like a bit stronger than mine. Then I get intimidated and then I don't know what to say. Like, I think my reaction towards people like really changes in front, yeah, depending on like how they present themselves to me. So I guess my question is, how do I assert myself in front of different audiences?
Thank you, Connie. And I bet a lot of other people on the call have similar concerns, because this is very, very common and totally normal. And two ideas that I have for you, and they're both super simple. And so this is for everybody. The first one is a piece of advice that I received from my worst boss ever. I absolutely hated this guy, and he was a terrible manager, except he gave me this one piece of advice that changed my life, that I've shared widely and heard is useful for many other people. Have in your mind the goal to be in a group meeting, the goal to be one of the first 3 people to speak. It doesn't mean you always have to be, but the goal of speaking early changes the whole dynamic for you in the experience of this meeting. And this is especially if you're a junior person, which I was when he was my boss. What happens when there's a group of people in the room and they're dominant people who are sharing their ideas, they're not making eye contact with everyone, right? Because we don't in a group. We make eye contact with a few people in the group. And if they haven't registered your presence, they're not making eye contact with you. They're making eye contact with other people, and you increasingly feel invisible, and it gets harder and harder for you to speak up later. And then if you do speak up, say 45 minutes into a 1-hour meeting, not like this, but like, group conversation, then all of a sudden everybody's attention is like right on you, and it's very uncomfortable. When you speak up early, though, it's not that you need to say anything smart at all. Your speaking up can happen in the conversational pattern before the meeting officially starts. You can bring up something about the weather or current events, or you can just ask somebody how they're doing. And you can also just ask a question. That totally counts. Or you can just affirm an emotional reaction, like somebody shares an idea and you just say out loud, "That's a great idea. I love that." Or whatever it is that you're reacting to. So it's just you having sounds come out of your mouth in the early part of the meeting. Then later on in the meeting, you feel much more comfortable and able to speak, and your bar for your contribution internally has lowered. You don't need to be brilliant. You don't need to say only brilliant things, but the longer you wait to speak, the higher your bar goes. The second thing is I talked about a coalition of the willing, having allies that you are motivating in support of your cause. Have this actively and strategically happening at work or at school, where you and some friends, classmates, colleagues are amplifying each other's voices intentionally, so that you share an idea, Connie, and you know that your friend Lily is going to say, when she has the opportunity, so like Connie said, and later in the meeting, she's going to come back and say, I want to come back again to what Connie said. Or when you share an idea, she's going to say, yes, great idea. And you do the same thing for Connie. And Leo is also on your team, and you do the same thing for Leo. This is something that senior women on boards do for each other. So I talked to a number of senior women, and I don't know if there's any research, but it's a thing. It's a widespread practice where it's hard to be in the minority and be the only woman on a board. But when you have at least 2 women or 3 women on the board, then you can do this amplification of each other. And this is something I've talked about specifically with Asian students at SOM, where there are cultural differences that have students from the US, and especially white, being much louder in the classroom than Asian students, including from the US. And so some of these students in multiple cohorts have just talked with each other about amplifying each other's voices. And as a teacher, I can see, and I've witnessed, it makes a huge difference. So those are 2 small things.
That's just amazing. Connie,
thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, it was very, very inspiring.
Thank you.
And I think that sort of touches on another question that somebody asked in the chat, which is the difference between male and female when it comes to how they approach influencing others. And you touched on it a little bit, but I think this is worth sort of getting into a little more.
Yeah, I can mention one more piece about this, where I've suggested to everybody that people will be more receptive when you are warm, which is absolutely true, but it's even more important for women than for men, because women, far more than men, get backlash when people don't perceive us as being warm. And they call us some gender-specific B words like bitchy, bratty, bossy. It's crazy that bossy is an insult, and it's only for girls and women, right? So even more than men, women need to come across as warm in order to be influential. Now, having said that, you may be a woman that says, forget it, I hate it, don't tell me what to do, that's not authentic to me. I'm a serious person, and I'm an aggressive person, and that's just my style. I can't tell you what to do. I'm just letting you know that what you've already experienced of getting pushback is going to continue as long as you have that as your dominant personality style. But it doesn't mean that you can't succeed. It just means it's going to be a little bit harder. when we're expressing warmth, we need to not just feel it, but we need to do it intentionally. So that includes things like smiling, like we talked about on a Zoom meeting, but also when we're writing, like we're writing texts, messages, emails, we need to be expressing more warmth than we do in words in a conversation, because typically it's our nonverbals that show a lot of our warmth, and those are stripped out. And research finds that when people are reading messages, they perceive far less warmth than the sender intended, and they can perceive far greater insults than the sender intended. So especially when we're writing, being conscious of that is good.
I do want to give Mavis the chance to ask a question, since they were raising their hand earlier. So Mavis, you can be our last question.
Thank you, David. Hi, Professor. Your advice was really great, and I think currently I'm facing a challenging situation where I'm transforming myself from an industry or corporate to consulting, strategic consulting, management consulting. So one particular situation I was facing every day is that my colleagues or leaders, they consider me a professional from someone who is very professional from industry, but they don't really see me as competent as those consulting babies who really have methodologies, structures, everything specifically in consulting industry. I don't know whether I made myself clear, but yeah, it's just, I think they are sometimes biased. So when I get tasks or projects, I'm always assigned to content related, content building, but not storylining or methodology building or proposal making, this kind of tasks. So my question was, is how can you handle this kind of biased situation, or are there any differences when you trying to influencing people if they are biased or not? Should I just take them as they were not biased, but in the meanwhile, I feel like they were really biased. They are biased, or I should do something strategically or tactically to change this situation.
So I'm sorry you're in this situation, Mavis. And yeah. The big broad question about bias, can we de-bias people? No, people are always biased in all kinds of ways. So what we want, the only thing that we can do is we can accept the fact that they're biased, and we can try to influence their behavior. And the specific question that I would recommend that you ask, and this is really many of my students' very favorite influence technique that I teach, is called the magic question. And very briefly, what all the question is asking, what would it take? And that you can use this in almost any influence situation, but this is a perfect example where rather than making the situation be about bias and how do I deal with bias, that bring it down to the specific behavior that you would like to influence, which is your boss or whoever's doing the assigning of projects, assigning a different kind of project. And you want to be working on storylining projects, for example, and you just go to your boss. So you ask for a meeting so that they know in advance and they're willing to pay attention and they've committed to it. And you ask them, what would it take for me to be able to do some storylining rather than just all content? And your boss will tell you exactly what it will take. And that is really all it will take to make this happen. I'm not saying that it's going to happen instantaneously. It's possible that your boss will say, you need to do some other kind of thing first, or you need to, display some kind of experience or show them in some way. It's going to be the start of a conversation. But your boss wants you to be happy, wants you to be engaged at work, knows that you can do this by working on the kind of work that you love and can do well. And unless you have a bad boss, in which case you should leave and go to another boss. But as long as you have a decent boss, they will absolutely tell you what it will take. And I'm sorry, and you know, that you're frustrated. I feel you, and I would feel the same way. Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much. I try this next time.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I know that there are many questions that we didn't have time to get to, but I do want to be respectful of everybody's time, as well as Professor Zoe Chance's time. And so this, I think we should officially end. And I think Professor has graciously agreed to stay on for a little bit. I think we have to hear whether it's okay if other people stay on as well. But this is the official end of today's event. Thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to say that we do have a tradition here, which is that we take a group photo. And so for everybody that is able to turn on your webcams so that we can have a group photo with Professor here. And I'll also unmute everybody so that everybody gets a chance to say thank you personally.
Thank you very much,
so much,
Professor.
Devin.
Thank you, Professor Chance.
Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
跟我说谢谢。